Oh no! Oh no! No, we're back.
Oh no! We're back. Or alternatively, if the pilot episode turns out to be total shit, hey, it's us. It's the first time we're meeting.
Yeah.
We're bonus experience. I've never seen you before in my life.
Who are you again?
I'm Ray.
And I'm Monica.
Oh, Monica, that's a nice name.
Thanks.
You remind me of somebody I've known for like 10 years now.
My mom gave it to me.
Would you like to be on a podcast with me that takes a deeper look beyond the play experience at the finer details of running and writing games?
I think I would.
How do you feel about swearing?
I love swearing. I'm mad about it.
Maybe I will. All right, what do you want to talk about? We're going to talk about house rules as the gateway drug to game design.
Yeah, that sounds like a good thing to talk about. So the big question is, when you're running a game, why house rule? Why bother to mess with the existing mechanical structure that a game comes with?
Because some of it is bad.
Yes.
Come on. You've played in a system where you've looked at part of and some of it has been bad. Right?
And sometimes a lot of it has been bad.
Sometimes a lot of it is bad.
Sometimes there's a lot of it.
But you still want to run the game for whatever reason.
Sometimes a lot of it is bad and people insist that it's not.
It's fans and brand loyalty, and I understand. It's not a person, though. It's a system. It's a series of rules. And you can break them, you can ignore them, you can change them. Yeah. And I prefer the changing part.
Yeah. So just let me put out there, as a person with experience in this, writing rules is hard, but you should playtest, and you should always playtest. You should playtest with people who are not in your regular playgroup, and you should playtest with people outside your regular playgroup, playtest with people online. And if you are designing a system, you should have someone else run the system you've designed, because when you're not at the helm, you got to make sure that somebody else who's not you can understand it. This is super important. Also, probably another show we'll do later.
How to run a playtest and why you should fucking do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you house rule because the rules as written don't fucking work. Or you don't fucking like them. Or it turned out you completely forgot and assumed that the rules actually work a different way entirely, and then you go back and read and go, oh my god, stealth in D&D works how? And you never actually had any problems running it the way you did, and you accidentally house ruled something.
Yeah, and when you realize that you've accidentally house ruled something, you're actually doing really tiny little bits of game design.
Yeah, like little smidgens.
Little nuggets.
Little smack rolls.
So anyway, when's a good time to house rule? I mean, besides, we already covered the point of house ruling is to patch rules that suck, or to perhaps make things easier. So when's a good time to do it?
Well, I honestly started house ruling because everybody else was doing it. This was baby GM Ray, who started running her very first game, which was Exalted, and borrowed house rules from you, Monica, actually.
Oh, yeah?
Because you had just run your games that way. And I was like, oh, well, that's fun. And I just took it. It was like, well, other people are doing this, so I'll do it too.
So do you happen to remember which of my rules you took?
Stunts always confer motes and willpower, whether they are successful or not.
Oh yeah, I forgot that was a thing.
And roll highest virtue to regain willpower instead of rolling conviction.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two that I remember just off the top of my head.
Okay.
I was just like, fuck, that's way better. I'll do that.
Yeah. It was just I'm actually really glad that you remembered those, because I forgot about them. And I knew they were like patches that I had done, and I actually got them from Henry. They're Henry's patches, because he ran Exalted for me, and I copied him. And you copied me. So ultimately, you copied him. He was the person who read the book and went, this is bullshit, and patched the things that didn't work. So really, the first thing you do is look for places like, okay, the conviction thing specifically. So for those of you who are listening who are not familiar with Exalted previous editions, there were 4 virtues which you could channel for bonus dice, but also sort of directed the way your character behaved and determined your curse as an Exalt and a whole bunch of other shit. But there was...
I liked virtues.
I liked virtues too. I'm disappointed that they got rid of them. There was a lot of mechanical impetus towards investing everything in conviction, which also happened to be the asshole stat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the only way to regain willpower, which you needed to fuel your special powers, and especially your really strong special powers called charms, was to roll your conviction after a full night's rest. And Henry was the one who had read that rule and was like, well, that's stupid. Why do you not just go with your highest virtue? So instead of being mechanically incentivized to skew towards asshole stat, you were simply rewarded for having a high virtue, full stop. And that's recognizing the design space that, hey, this mechanical text trends characters towards a certain way unnecessarily. I'm going to fix it so that other options are rewarded.
Yeah.
So that's like an under the hood look at why that choice was made. The same with the stunt dice. In fact, I had completely forgotten that the actual stunt dice rule was that if the stunt failed, you didn't get the motes back. Like, we just house ruled that across the board constantly because it was a stupid rule that I actually forgot the real rule existed.
I also house rule when I start like really fucking with the setting and the themes of the game. I know that for example, D&D, I had a brief modern setting D&D that I was doing, and there are like some out of the box rules for like if you want to have firearms, but it didn't really do enough for me. Like, I wanted more into like exactly how technology would work. Like, could you patch in new skills? What would be like the socioeconomic impact of magic? So I had to come up with new systems to make this new setting work for this system. And that's house ruling. That's home cooking.
So would you consider hacking a system where basically you take an existing system and you sort of cut the rules out and you're like, well, I'm going to use this existing system to run this other thing? Would you consider that just like a really big house rule? So like, okay, so the best example of this I can give that I know you're immediately...
Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Right, is a hot dog a sandwich? Is a hack a house rule? Like, consider my No Rest for the Wicked, which is a hack for Powered by the Apocalypse with a sprinkle of Dungeon World on top. Like, or is that its own system?
I think, isn't Powered by the Apocalypse kind of its own monster though? Like, because there's a lot of different...
Okay, Metro Exalted.
All right, Metro Exalted.
Which I didn't really change a whole lot of the rules there. I just changed sort of the flavor around it. So is that a house rule?
I mean, yeah, I think that's just I think it's just a collection of new house rules, because you had to figure out how new shit would work if we all have like cars and TV.
Okay, that's fair.
I mean, that's what I think anyway.
So I house rule most commonly when it would save time. Am I too lazy to look up what it is? Yes. Will I make a rule up on the fly? Yes. Sometimes, though, the real rules are super unwieldy and annoying, and I will change them on the fly to be faster, because we got 2 hours and people have lives.
And we're not going to spend 5 minutes resolving this one combat action.
Right.
There are times when you shouldn't house rule.
Yeah.
Like, I love making new things for games. Sometimes I kind of go overboard and maybe make things that aren't necessarily needed, but you got to know when to stop putting paint on the canvas. Also, don't house rule to take shit away from your players. I have had GMs that decided we were too powerful and then would like hamstring us with house rules because they felt that the actual rules as written were giving us unfair advantages. And I'm really player forward. And if you really want to like put your powerful characters in a pickle, there are way more elegant and less antagonistic ways to do that than to just say, well, it turns out that this completely canonical thing that you legitimately bought is not something I like, so I'm not going to let you have it or use it anymore.
The best way to deal with that is that sometimes people want to buy things that have been written into the game that are in fact broken, or will skew play in the direction you don't want it to go in. Let's make a callback to Exalted First Edition's, what was that? 5-dart Hearthstone, the one that made you immortal? Gem of Infinite Health, or what the fuck?
Uh-huh. The one where it was like, you had to like be burned and then everything scattered and buried, and even then you could still come back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one. The one that like made you regenerate constantly, and so you had a character who literally could be threatened by nothing. So like it's fair to say you're not allowed to take that and declare that as a statement ahead of time. And I'm not so sure that
is fair.
That's a house rule. That's sort of like I guess it is if we're calling a hack a house rule. So yeah, that's a restriction that's cutting out something that skews play in a way you don't want it to. Right. It is not fair to let someone take that and then have regrets.
And also, I was thinking more along the lines of not just things that are like fringe, super powerful, buried deep within the Book of Lost Elves or whatever you called it,
the complete Book of Elves,
but more things that are like the Big
complete
Book of Elves. Oh, the complete book. I like Big Book of Elves.
Big Book of Elves.
It's like a picture book. It's like cardboard.
Complete Book of Elves is a D&D second edition supplement that did contain an obnoxiously powerful like kit. I think that's what they were called. It was like the second edition version of a prestige class.
Babies look and find elves. Stuff that's like in the basic rules. I had a really antagonistic GM who would decide that even though it was an ability that was intrinsic to your character and your character concept, it got in the way of the story he was trying to tell, so you didn't get to use it anymore. Yeah, stuff like that.
So I want to amend what I said about having regrets by letting someone take something that's too powerful. It is okay to, out of character, address the player and be like, this ain't working and here's why, and be transparent about, well, I let you take this thing and it turns out it's skewing the game in a way I don't want it to go, and I would appreciate it if you relinquished it. We can work out a cool way for that to happen, right? You just have an open and honest conversation with that person. It is not particularly okay to solve your out-of-character problem, which is to say, this item or this power or whatever is skewing your play, by trying to take it away in-game. That's using an in-character solution to an out-of-character problem. And almost never ever do that.
Always bad.
Always talk things out with your players. Never use an in-character solution to an out-of-character problem. Only villains do that.
So
as we sort of stated previously, house ruling is the beginnings of game design. It's game design 101. That beer is affecting my ability to enunciate.
Who would have thought?
As I noted and said before, the places that GMs start to reflexively patch holes and create new rules to save time are the beginnings of design. I mean, you've been playing this game and you've realized that the rules as written don't work, and so you're writing new ones. Have you ever added an entirely new subsystem to a game? Are you at home, the listener, saying no? Well, have you ever added like hero points or some other reroll Benny to get out of trouble to D&D? Guess what?
Haha. Yeah, even if you didn't like create the specific tool that you used, you still found a use for it and plugged it into the system when it wasn't already baked in. I mean, you're not playing D&D out of the box if you're like, I want to use hero points and I want to use gritty realistic healing because I'm an asshole.
Yeah, I have a good friend who runs D&D almost exclusively, and like occasionally he's like, yeah man, I don't like these things, and I've been changing all these rules for this outdated system we like playing, and I'm adding hero points and all that, and I'm like, oh, well, Babby's first game design. I'm so proud of you for thinking about this critically. And like, the beginning of that sounded like me being an asshole, but the end of it was like, no, I appreciate it when people have thought about the structure of their game critically, and like, what about this isn't working so that I can change it, or what about this fits the way my table approaches play. I can't tell you how many times I've had a conversation with someone who tells me how much they love D&D 3.5. Oh my god, it's the best game ever. Pro tip, it's not. And then I'm like, okay, well, what about it did you like? What, was it the 50 million unbalanced supplements? Was that the part that you were a big fan of? And
that was my favorite.
And then they're like, well, no, we added all these things and we didn't allow these things, and like we house ruled in hero points, and like we house ruled in a different kind of healing, and we used this subsystem from Call of Cthulhu to make it more scary. And I'm like, well, then you didn't actually love D&D 3.5. You loved your version of D&D 3.5. And while that sort of invalidates your argument for loving the rules as written, it does mean that you, as the person who loved that version of the game, did maybe a lot of design work.
Do you know what like really gets a bug up my ass? People who are like, you can't play an elf monk. Have you seen this shit? Where they're like, monks wouldn't exist in the forest and elves can't be monks because monks are supposed to be Asian. And it just it's Dungeons and Dragons, and you think an elf monk is the least believable thing in the system? Fuck off.
Can you hear the face I'm making?
I can feel it. I can feel it.
God. There's no Asian elves.
A psychic imprint. One, there's no Asian elves apparently. Two, fuck off. I'm making an elf monk the elfiest monk.
I mean, we could get on a whole tangent about this, but it boggles that someone would be like, elves aren't Asian when there is a setting where there are magic potions that make you grow and also literally dragons.
It's in the fucking title.
Magic is real, so go fuck yourself.
I believe in immortal, beautiful people that have inherent magics, but they cannot be from China. Jesus.
So, hey, tell me about some of the best house rules that you've either made up or you've encountered.
Well, I already told you about the two that you introduced. Well, Henry introduced me to by way of you.
By way of me, yeah.
When I first actually started, like my very, very first RPG was D&D 3.5.
Sorry.
I have very little memory of it. I know it really soured me on it for a while. and then I made some friends in high school that played White Wolf games. And that completely different side of the coin.
I mean,
I loved White Wolf games.
So I say I'm sorry, but my first game was Exalted First Edition.
Oh, Jesus.
It ruined me.
All right. Anyway, the very first White Wolf game I played was a Changeling the Dreaming game. And my storyteller used what she called the pilot episode rule, where if you made a character, went through that whole process, then played one session of it and realized, I don't like this character, or there was something about it you wanted to change, or anything, the first episode or the first session is considered the pilot episode, so we'll just recast you. So I use that rule basically with every game that I start. I remind the players, this is just the pilot episode. If you don't like your guy, a second episode, we can recast him, or we can change this or change that. Don't feel like you're locked into the mistakes you made before you started playing.
Yeah, that's a fantastic rule.
I also started adapting passive knowledge checks in D&D. I found this recommended in a bunch of different places, where instead of rolling to know something, the DM just asks for your history or arcana or whatever, and then makes a judgment based on your ranks without actually calling for a roll. Which I really like that, because I don't feel like your education and your knowledge should be left up to the same like random chance as the combat system. It's not interesting to be playing a dwarf and like, oh, look at this fucking stone statue. This is really great. Where does this come from? What kind of... And you roll your history stone cunning and you get a 2, because, that's always a chance. And the DM just like, you don't know shit about that. It's like, what? That makes no sense. Instead, you could just be like, oh, yeah, I'm proficient in history. I've got, a +7 modifier. And the DM could be like, oh, okay, yeah, here's what you know about that. And it just, it feels like it leaves things a lot more open than relying on random chance.
For our audience at home, we had a whole text conversation about this, you and I.
Oh, did we?
Yeah, we did. You actually texted me to be mad about how D20s kind of suck.
D20s do suck.
And I was like, here's some math reasons why that's the case. And then you like talked about your passive thing, and I was like, that's a good rule. The 1D20 works fine for combat because you want a level of unpredictability. You want that.
Yeah, you want stakes. You want you want complications and consequences, but you don't need that shit for like, do I know what this history book says? Like, you don't. That's not fun. But that's also, that's. I don't know if this counts as a house rule. I think it's more of like a philosophy of running that I picked up from Fate, where you just plain don't ask for a roll unless failure would actually be interesting.
Oh my God.
Don't give them the choice if there's a wrong answer.
Just do this the whole time. Or if you're going to call for a roll in a case where failure might not be interesting, then you do basically like a reference Cthulhu Dark, which is a tiny indie game that's super fucking simple and strips playing like Cthulhu Mythos down into like 1 or 2 dice rolls.
Cool.
It's really neat. And I made an Exalted version called Exalted Light, which I can put link in the show notes whenever we get around to that. Cthulhu Dark, right? So basically, in Cthulhu Dark, you roll a 1d6, and 1 is everything. Everything succeeds, right? So like, you try to pick the lock, but if you roll a 1, you pick the lock, and the door swings open, and you are confronted with the unblinking void, right?
Okay.
On a 6, you pick the lock, you open the door, and are able to slip unnoticed away from the Shoga coming up behind you. You know, so
okay, like, so it's the whole it's yes and the system.
It is a yes and system. So in the instances where a failure would not be interesting, you can instead, but people love rolling dice, and people like randomization, and people like the thrill of will this work or won't it? So you shift your dice roll to success, but the lower you roll, you're still going to do the action. Your character is still going to succeed. Like, never strip competency away from a character. So you're still going to succeed, but not in the way you want to. To encapsulate an example of how I did this recently, I'm going to keep referencing Through the Breach because it's the game I've been running very recently. And Malifaux, the minis game, and Through the Breach both use a proprietary card deck. It's the same number of cards as a regular card deck, so if you want to play it, you can use a regular one, but you can buy proprietary ones, and they're pretty fucking neat. But a red Joker is a 14, which is the highest possible success, and a black Joker is a 0, and it's the worst possible success. And as I've been running this game, I've always treated both of them as like a huge narrative impetus. So if somebody gets a red Joker, they get everything they want and then some, and sometimes that and then some comes with things that they didn't necessarily ask for. That doesn't screw them over, but maybe has strings, you know?
Yeah.
A black Joker has always been exactly what you wanted, but not at all on your terms.
You succeeded, but at what cost?
But at what cost? So like the like epilogue of my game involved one character trying to infiltrate this theater and his rival, and she's a powerful fixture of the setting, and he's fucked around in another powerful fixture of the setting's business, and Victor Ramos and his goons are maybe gonna kill him, and he's sweeping the whole theater to see whether or not it's been set up to be like a death trap, right? Like, are the doors sealed and are there people with guns waiting for me outside, right? So he black Jokers, and he's like, oh god, now I'm not gonna know. And I'm like, no, you find out that they have gunsmiths, which are in setting like really, really dangerous hitmen.
Okay.
They're waiting for you at every door.
Okay.
And like, he gets to know everything. And then I describe another of the major canon characters, because Malifaux is a game full of heroes and stuff, and I had used them really liberally in this game. And I'm like, she approaches you, and so I describe this character, and is like, I'm honestly a Kairos, nice to meet you. And then everybody at the table is like, oh fuck. Like, I just introduced one of the more powerful characters in the setting, and suddenly she's here on a black Joker. Like, Henry dropped his pencil in rage. So you pull things like that where you're like, now I'm hanging this big, like, oh shit, over your players' heads. And like, of course, that's not stopping them from continuing to do the thing they want to do, but now they have this big threat that could go off. I've put a Chekhov's gun on the mantle, and I may fire it.
I like that. That's good.
Thanks.
That's good stuff.
It is good stuff. So yeah, Exalted taught me how to house rule well. Like I said a little bit before, Exalted First Edition was my first game.
Yeah, it kind of requires being good at house ruling.
I mean, Henry
I'm hard on Exalted. I love Exalted. I'm tough because I care.
We are going to talk about it a lot in the show because it's the thing that brought us together.
Yeah, that's right. It's what got me stuck in this RPG hell.
Because I noticed you had power combat stats listed for a character in a webcomic.
Did I?
Yeah, you sure did.
When was that?
In the Freedom Stone.
Well, yeah, but I don't remember any of this.
Okay, so in like, I have a stupid memory. So in like one of the earlier episodes, Cricket holds up her Smash Fist, her singular Smash Fist, before you had to buy them in pairs. Yeah. And you had like the stats appear next to it, which is hilarious. But they were the power combat stats.
And that was when you knew.
Yeah, and I was like, wow, your GM's forcing you to use power combat?
Yup. That GM. Oh boy. Okay, anytime I bring up, oh yeah, I've had a GM that did, I'm talking about that GM. We have it. We'll talk about it.
We can have a show on like war stories.
We're gonna have like it'll just be us rocking on a porch, like Whitland.
Yep,
talking about
I've seen some shit.
Day.
Oh man, so yeah, I house rule on the fly a lot. Almost every game that I run, I wind up house ruling. Often because I'm too damn lazy to check the book. So I just will make up a rule and compare it later, and if I like mine better, we'll keep using it. And I can't even catalog how many times I've been like, nah, I'm just gonna make up a subsystem right now.
I'm basically running Exalted the house ruling right now for my real life table group. Mm-hmm. I've known them for like almost 2 years now. And of course, like as soon as I met them, I was like, do any of you play Exalted? And I got 4 resounding, what the hell is that? And one of them made a face like, I was like, no. So I had to work with her. Like, what happened? Why don't you, is it okay if I like Exalted? Should I go outside? Like, but she had a bad GM experience I think it was just a bad game experience because she had a concept that was tied to a specific location, but then the entire party wanted to leave. So her concept was completely invalidated. And I've been trying to, no, come on. I want to run it, please. I love it so much. I'm good at it. I promise I'm good at it. And she finally was like, okay, I think I'm ready. So then they come to me with like, okay, we're ready. We want to play Exalted. I'm like, great. And it's like, oh, fuck, it's a fucking mess right now, though. like everyone's finally ready to come over to my place. And there's dishes under the couch. And my cat box smells like shit. And oh, fuck. So now I'm running what is basically 2nd edition with some of the 3rd edition changes, the 3rd edition sorcery. Because the third edition sorcery is like, wow, it's like it's the shining jewel of, in my opinion. I think sorcery and sorceress workings in Exalted is fucking incredible. Everything else in Exalted 3rd edition is kind of it's like an 800-page book, and these are people who've never played Exalted before at all, and I'm not gonna just bring in an 800-page core book and be like, here you go. Pick charms. There's 55 in the craft tree alone. Like I basically have had to like cobble together something that was accessible from all of the parts of Exalted that I like. So I've basically like been making like Exalted 2.7, but they don't know because they never played Exalted before. So to them, this is all one cohesive experience. Like I'm playing it all out of the box.
So yeah. My diplomatic answer as a person currently on Exalted's payroll is there's a starter kit.
The Tomb of
Dreams. Something. Tomb of not 5 corners.
The noun of adjective nouns.
Yeah, the Tomb of noun thing noun. Yeah, that one.
I did look at that. Yes.
Yeah, I believe it comes with pre-generated characters and is a decent starting point.
It is. I agree.
Yeah. So if you want to start there, I would recommend starting there. Same to my audience.
Yes, there. For anyone who's like, what the fuck is this Exalted thing? They keep talking about it. There's a quick start introduction to Exalted that you can find. It's like on Drive-Thru.
It is on Drive-Thru.
Some other places, I'm sure, because I only really use Drive-Thru.
I think it might just be Drive-Thru because the Onyx Path stopped doing actual print runs.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's too expensive. Look, I'm perfectly happy to diss on previous editions. I didn't work on those.
Yeah, they weren't paying you.
Nope. But anyway, so like my most recent successful house rule is again from Through the Breach because that's what I've been running. And I keep mentioning all these powerful opponents who are all canon characters from the minis game. And Through the Breach actually has a the GM never touches the dice kind of rule.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. And uses static difficulties instead. So you have all NPCs have a station, which indicates sort of how tough they are. And then they have a static value they add to their stats, and that's the difficulty it is to hit them and how hard they hit back. The problem is that the static values get really high So the average character has a stat value of like +5, and of course you're looking at a card deck, so you're looking at 1 to 13 as your general spread, with 0 in there for the black joker and a 14 for the red joker. So you have a pretty narrow spread of numbers you can hit.
Mm-hmm.
So the master, which is the heroes of the wargame status, is 12 and 13, and they have stats at like 7. So if you have a master who is defense 7 and they are master 13, that means your difficulty to hit them is 20, right? So if you have a character whose average stat is 5, what can they not do?
Hit him,
given that the card deck tops out at 14 and there's only one 14 in the whole deck split among 4 to 6 players. We've pointed that out in playtesting several times, and they've been like, well, that's intentional. You're not supposed to be able to mess with the masters. And I'm sort of like, well, what's the point?
Well, then why did you put it in there?
Right. So what's the point of playing in this setting if you're not supposed to interact with the cool canon characters? So I fixed it. And went, okay, masters,
don't worry, I'll fix it for you.
Don't worry, I'll fix it for you, because I really like these characters. I want them to show up in my game, and I want my players to be able to interact with them without them their appearance just being steamrolling them.
Yeah.
I mean, they're important, powerful people, so they're supposed to be frightening and dangerous when they show up, right? I don't want to take that away. You should absolutely balk at the idea of fighting them, but it shouldn't be impossible, like mathematically impossible. So what I did was I set the TN for all masters at 16. If they would blow it out of the water, it's 16. If you have a default stat of 5, that means you need an 11, meaning you have 11, 12, 13 red joker in the deck for everybody. So it's not impossible, just hard. Yes, that was the thing I did to adjust the difficulty curve for powerful opponents and Through the Breach, and it worked out incredibly.
Yeah, it actually gives your player something to shoot for, as opposed to here's this edifice that I can't interact with.
Well, you just can't. And it was great because one of my players, this started with an adventure that was for an event, and everybody had pre-generated characters, and one of the characters came with a background where they were rivals with one of the setting's masters.
Oh, cool.
Right, yeah, it was awesome, and he bought into it and played it to the nines, and if I hadn't adjusted that difficulty, he couldn't have messed with her at all.
Yeah, there wouldn't have been a rivalry. Yeah, that sucks.
Anything else cool you've done lately?
I've done lots of cool stuff. I'm the wind, baby. I'm the coolest cat. Other than trying to build Exalted 2.7, nope.
Well, that sounds like maybe a good place to wrap up then.
Yep. All right, everybody get out. I'm leaving.
Unless you got anything else you want to say about house rules and design and...
Just do it, man. It's this is my advice for GMing. Just do it. Just try it out.
Just do it, but think about why you're doing it.
Yes.
And when you think about why you're doing it, that puts you into the mindset of beginning to do design.
Yes.
Because none of these things are done for no reason.
Yes. Some of them, there may be a bad reason.
I mean, it may be a bad reason, but it's not no reason.
You can make the false god canon bleed a little bit when you realize, oh, these aren't codified and written in stone. These aren't sacred things that must be upheld. I can just fucking change it if I want to.
Yeah, you can just fucking change it if you want to.
Fucking change it if you want to. Should that be our sign off? Just fucking change it if you want to. Be all right, this has been bonus experience. Just change it if you fucking want to.
Well, thank you everybody very much for listening. We're bonus experience. We'll be back next week. Maybe.
Probably.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. Take +1 forward to GMing this week. We are written and produced by Monica and Ray. Our theme song is Reuse Noise with the Light by CDK and is used under the Attribution Non-Commercial Creative Commons license. Our logo and art are by Neno Studios, Neno, and you can find them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can earn more bonus experience on WordPress, iTunes, or wherever you get podcasts. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next episode.